In this video, I want to give more detailed instructions on how to model this speaker box. And so I'm going to start a new sketch on the top plane, and I'm going to go to the create slot, and I'm going to tell it to do an overall length slot. And so I'll do overall length or overall slot, and I'm just going to put this out here in space here for a minute. And then I'm going to dimension this overall length. And so I'll do that as 311. And then I'm going to dimension this width, and I'm going to do that as 75. And then I'm going to put this at the origin. So I'll do a midpoint constraint between this line and the origin. Notice it turns black. It's all fully defined. Let's move these dimensions out a little bit so we can easily get to those if we want to change them. Then I'm going to do a center point slot or a center to center. So I'll do another slot and I'll do center to center. I want this first center to be here, the second center to be there, and I'll dimension the width of this from here to here as 15. Now, because I put it to the concentric to this circle and to the origin, I don't need a length dimension on that. I'm going to change this to construction. So I'll hit X on the keyboard and change that to construction. I'll draw a line from here to here. Now I didn't really need to do that, but I just like to do it so I can keep track a year from now of maybe some logic of why I did some things that I did. I'll put a line across there. Okay, I'm going to rotate around and I'll finish sketch, and then I'm going to extrude this. I forgot a circle that I want to put in this sketch, so we can always go back and edit a sketch. Notice our red padlock symbol that it's fully defined. I'm going to edit this sketch and I'm going to change the construction line type and draw a line from the origin over to this point, and then I'll draw a circle from this midpoint of this line back to the origin, and I'll dimension the diameter of that circle as 30. Notice it turns black. It's all fully constrained. Notice the padlock symbol over here. Well, I'll finish this sketch and then I'm going to rotate around a little bit so I can see this in 3D. And I'll do an extrude, and I want to extrude both this area and this area, so I'll make sure I get both of those areas. I could have done these as two separate sketches and then I wouldn't need to do that separate step, but because it was so simple, I kept this in the same sketch. And then I'm going to go a distance of 209, or you could put 210 if you wanted to round that off to whatever distance you need. And then I'm going to tell it to go symmetric, and I want that to be the total length, that 210 to be the total length. Now I'm going symmetric because later on we're going to split this thing in half, and that origin plane is what we'll use to split it in half. And I'll say OK to that. And then I want to do a circular pattern of this feature, but I need to turn the visibility of that sketch back on because the purpose of creating that circle was so that I could use it for the center of the circular pattern. And so I'll select pattern. I'm going to put it on circular pattern instead of rectangular. And I can either pattern bodies or features. I'm going to select features, but we can do it either way. And I can select this feature either down here or I could select it up here in the canvas. So I'm going to just select then for the axis, I want to get the center of this circle, and make sure you get that circle this down, not the origin over here or the axis of the origin. I'll get that circle and I'll tell it that I want to do two copies, and they'll be full circle or 180 degrees apart. I'll say okay to that. All right, and so now I've got a copy facing this way and a copy facing that way. Notice over here in the browser right now, I have two bodies. Next, I'll do a rectangular pattern of this first body. So I'll do a rectangular pattern, and I'll either can select either feature or bodies. And this time, I think I'll select bodies, and I'll select this body. And then for the axis, I'm going to select the x-axis. Now, you could select the edge of the part itself, but I always prefer, whenever possible and practical, to use the origin geometry, because that geometry can't be deleted, it can't be changed, and so it's not going to fail when you make any edits. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to tell it that I want to go spacing, and my spacing distance will be 60 millimeters. I want to make 5 copies, but I want those copies to be mid-plane about the first one, and so I'll tell it to do symmetric. I'm not going to go in the second direction, but I always prefer to change this number to 1. I don't know why. It just bothers me that it was on 3. So I'll say OK to that. And now I have those 5 copies. I then want to make a copy of the rotated body. So I'll do a rectangular pattern again, and I'll select this body, and I will select the x-axis again. Now you might have trouble getting it. It is highlighting here, but if you have trouble getting it, you can always select it over here from the browser as well. And then I'm going to tell it I want 2 copies, and I want them 60 millimeters apart. Make sure that it's on spacing, and we'll say OK to that. The next thing I want to do is combine all of these together, and I'm going to turn off the visibility of the sketch for a minute. And so I'll do combine, and I'm going to select one of these bodies, and then I will tell it to select tool bodies, and I'll select the other bodies. So you can either select them on the graphic screen or in the browser. And so I have all of those bodies selected. I need to get this one. Okay. So I have the original plus 6 copies selected. I want to join those together. Okay, so now over here in the browser, we see that we have one body. I then want to move this face out to here. Now you can either do that with press pull, or you could do it with offset face. In this case, I'm not sure that there would be any advantage to one over the other, but you don't want to do extrude, because if I did extrude, it's not going to get tangent to that, which is what I want. And before I do that, though, I want to turn on the visibility of the first sketch, and I'm going to right click on that sketch, and I'm going to tell it to show dimensions. And I've got this 75 out here, and I want to see what variable name that is. Now, it depends on the order in which you create your geometry, what that variable name is. You could give it a name yourself, so that then you just type in the name. But I see that it's D2, and so I'm going to do press pull, and I'm going to drag this out. And sometimes you can, and when you're in a sketch, you can actually select the dimension to put it in. I'll have to type it, so I'll do D2. Now, and then I want to do that divided by, though, 2. Okay, so I want to go the radius of this going across here. So I have to divide by 2. Now that'll make this out. Now notice the difference between the extrude is it came straight out. With this press pull or offset face, it connects over here. And that's what I want. All right, I'll hide that sketch again, and we'll go on to the next step. I then want to put a 5 millimeter fillet in these edges. Now I might try something different over here, and so I may end up removing the 5 millimeter fillet there, but let's go ahead, and I'm going to select this edge and this edge. I'll put in the 5 millimeters. Now let's say we went ahead and said OK, and then we decided we wanted to add that to that edge. So I would edit feature. I hold down the control key or command key on the Mac, and then I can select this edge and add it to. So now I have 3 edges selected for that fillet feature. Then I'll add another fillet, and I'm going to select this edge over here, and I'm going to put in 15, and then I'll control select this face, and I'll rotate around, and I'm going to select this face. Now, when I do that, I see that I'm getting an error here, and that's because I didn't put those 5 millimeter fillets back here in these edges. So let's go back and do that. So I'll edit this feature, and I'll hold down the control key, and I'll get this edge, this edge. Notice you don't have to rotate around to see those edges. You can select right through the body, and I'll say OK to that. And now let's do the second fillet, and I'm going to select this edge. I'll select this top face, and I'll select the bottom face, and I'll put in my radius. So I have two faces selected, one edge, and I'll put in my radius of 15. I'll say OK to that. Okay, so now I have the outside edges of my body filleted. I then want to shell this body out, and so let's look at this in a section view before I create the shell. So I'm going to go to the inspection tab, and I'm going to go to section analysis, and I'm going to select this plane, and you might have to flip that direction if it's showing the wrong side, but then I'm going to do shell. But it asks me to select any faces or bodies. I don't want to remove any of these outside faces, so I'm going to select a body over here in the browser, and then I'll put in my thickness of 15, and we'll see now we have that shelled out. Okay, so this was before the shell and then after the shell. I'll then turn my sketch visibility back on, and I want to extrude this slot. And so I'll do extrude, and I'm going to select that area, and for the I'll tell it to go symmetric, and I want to go through all for the distance. Now it defaults to cut. I don't want to do a cut, I want to do a join. So I'll put that on join, and I'll say OK to that. Now I didn't do this all the way down to the other side, because if I did, it would break through this fillet edge right here, and I don't want it to do that. And so we have to do a little trick to do this in 2 steps instead of doing it in 1 step. I now want to do a circular pattern of this feature, and so I'm going to do a circular pattern. I'll select pattern, do circular pattern. Now, because I did this as a feature joined to this, I have to select feature instead of body. So I'll do features, and then for the actual feature, I'll select that extrusion over here on the timeline, and then I'll get the selection tool for my axis, and I'll select the center of that circle, and I'll tell it I want 2 copies. Okay, so now we see the copy down here. I'll hide that sketch. Then I want to copy these 2 features, so I'll do a rectangular pattern, and I'll select those 2 features, and I'll get them over here from the browser. So I'll select this one and the circular pattern. I'll get my axes, and I'll select that x-axis, and then I'm going to tell it I want 3 copies 60 millimeters apart. And unfortunately, it previews with these faces that it's connected to, which is really kind of misleading. I want to go the other direction, so I'll go minus, and then I'll right now I'm going to leave this on identical. I'll say OK to that, and we see that this one, this third one on this pattern, is protruding through here. Now, if I change this, if I edit that feature, and instead of identical, if I use optimize, then it removes that third one. But I'm going to undo that for a minute, because I want to see if I can get rid of some extra geometry and maybe do this a different way. Well, see, I was looking at how this would look if this 15 fillet came all the way up, but then it looks like that's going to be an issue right there, so I don't think that idea is going to work. Let's just put in a 15 millimeter fillet there and see. I expect it to give me an error when I try this, but we'll just try it. And yeah, because it's too tight in this area right here. So I'm going to go back to the pattern and I'll edit that rectangular pattern and I'll put it on optimize. And and now that one, because it would have come out of here, is removed. Next, I want to extend these shortened faces to the edges. So this face over to that edge. And so I'm going to go to modify and I'll do replace face. And I want to replace this face, and this face. And then I'll go to target faces. Now make sure you have target chain turned on for this one. I'll rotate around. And so because I have target chain turned on, it will see all of the faces in this chain as the extension. And so I'll select one of those faces and it extends to that face. I'll say okay to that and we'll do the same thing on these. So I'll do modify, replace face, and I will select these two faces and then I'll get the selection tool for target faces and I'll rotate around and I will select one of the faces over here. Now, one thing about replace face is it will both add material, in this case we're just adding material, but it will also subtract. It'll do both at the same time. It will add and subtract as needed. So keep that tool in mind. It is very useful in many cases. Now I want to put some fillets in these edges right here, and I want to make sure that they stay parametric. So remember we had this dimension down here, and that was the diameter of this arc from here to here. And so the radius would be half of that. And then we offset this 15 millimeters towards the inside. Let's find the variable name for the offset. So this was D2, if we remember. We could have given it a name ourselves. I'm going to go to the parameters and I'm going to find the offset, and I see that that is D17. Okay, so that one is D17. So D2 and D17. So I'll do a fillet and I'm going to select one of these edges. Notice I can get it right through the part. And for the radius, I'm going to do D2, D2 divided by 2 minus D17, the offset distance, D17. By doing it this way, if I make a change, everything will update correctly. Now, I'm not sure whether I need to put in parentheses in there or not. So let's just say, actually, it's not giving me the OK yet. And so let's put parentheses around this and see if it then gives me the OK button. And it's still not allowing me to do OK. I don't like that it won't do that. I might have to create a variable name in order to do this. If I do that calculation in my head, it is 22.5, but that isn't a parametric result that would change if my model changes. I don't really like that it wasn't accepting my my formula. Well, I decided to try this again because I did a practice and it worked okay. So I'm going to select this edge, and for the radius, I'm going to do parentheses D2 divided by 2, and then I'll do close parentheses. And so now it's this time it's saying okay. I don't know what I did before. And then I do minus the 15. Okay. And so that time it's doing it. I don't know what I typed in incorrectly before. You got to be careful when you're putting in a formula that you put it in exactly correctly. All right, and then I'm going to hold down the control key and I'll get these other edges. Now, if I say OK to check this and I want to go back and do the others, I just simply go down here and I'll say edit feature and I'll hold down the control key and I'll get these other edges. So I want that edge and I can let go of the control key and it previews it. And then I can't remember whether I want to get this edge or not. We'll do this edge and this edge. Okay. And let's go ahead and do this one. I think what it was is I don't want to do that one over on that side. I'll say okay to that. All right. Now everything that I do on this side is also happening on the other side. So on my analysis, if I edit that and I flip that to the other side and we look at the other side, we see that it's the same geometry on the other side. So we're getting everything created just as we want. All right, the next thing I want to do is put this hole for the speaker over here. And so I'm going to do a new sketch, and I'm going to do it on this XZ plane. And I'm going to hide sketch number 1, and I'm going to draw a circle over here, approximately where the hole will be for the speaker. Now I want this to be lined up horizontally with the origin. I can just put a horizontal constraint between here and here, but I like to use a construction line because that lets me know a year from now the logic of what I was doing, that I put that in over horizontal from the origin. And then we'll give this a dimension. Now, we can always change the dimension later on. So if I want that to be 100, even after I create a feature, I can edit that and it will be, well, whatever it is. And so now I want this to be in the center of this space in here. So I need to put in the distance from here over to here. And notice the circle is not fully defined yet. We don't have the padlock symbol over here. It's not fully defined. So I'm going to dimension from here over to the origin, and I'm going to do that distance as 75. Actually, it's not in the middle of this space. It's in the middle of this space. See, one goes over to here, not all the way over to there. So you may have to do a measurement to see, how far you had to go. And actually, I meant to show that earlier on that radius that we put in as a formula. If I had done inspection and I had measured the radius of that, I would see that it's at 22.5, which we put it in as a formula so that if we change our other geometry, that radius is automatically going to update. Let's change this to 123. Okay, and actually I'm going to undo that. We'll leave it back on 100. And let's finish that sketch, and I'll make that sketch visible. And let's do an extrude, and I'll select that circle and tell it I want to go all the way through all, or the part in this direction. So I'll say OK to that. All right, so that cut that hole through. Now, if I want to edit that, if I want to change the size of it, if I edit that sketch, I can just type in the new dimension, 123. It increases the size of the circle, and it makes my hole larger. So you can edit things without having to repeat or do things over again. Just go back and edit what you did previously in the timeline. Let's make that sketch visible again, and I'm going to edit that sketch again, and I'm going to draw another circle here, and let's make that circle 155. So I'll dimension that as 155. And then I'm going to draw a square or a rectangle here. Now it might be easiest if you go to the front view and you go to slice, or even to just hide the body to see what you're working on, so that that's not obscuring what you're working on. And I'm going to do a rectangle. Now I want this to be construction line type, so I'll do construction line rectangle, and I'm going to go out here some distance, and I want it actually to be square, so I'm going to make this equal to that. Now there is a polygon tool that you could have used to create the square. But I like to see my construction lines to the center point that this puts in. We'll then put a dimension in here, and I'm going to do, say, 93.5. And if we want to change that dimension at any point, we can change that maybe to bring this out here closer to the center. If we want this exactly in the center, we could put a line across here and then put it at the midpoint of that. But of course, we want to measure the mounting holes in the speaker and get them the same as the, of course, we want to get the distance between these holes the same as the off-shelf speaker. And so I'll go ahead and finish this sketch, and I'm going to turn the body back on again, and I'll just edit this. I don't have to cut these holes separately unless I want to, but I'm just going to edit this feature, and I'll control select this area. I'm holding the control key down there, command key on the Mac, and this key, this area and profile, and I'll say okay to that. And so that cuts that through. If I go out of section view, we see the 4 holes up here, or the 2 holes and the 4 holes on total. And then I want to cut a counterbore going from here back. So I'm going to do extrude, and I'm going to select this profile, and I don't want to go extrude from where it's at. I want to extrude from offset, so I'll do from object, or rather than offset, I'll do object from this object, and then I want to go back into the part, and I'll type in the distance I want to go, let's say 4 millimeters, or 5, or whatever you need to, or 2, just, and I'll say okay to that. And then if I leave section view, we see that it's on the top and on the bottom. I'm going to go back into my section view, and for the next step I want to cut a hole out here, and I want it to be the width from here to here. So I'm going to edit this second sketch, and I'm going to then do P for project, and so I'll do P for project, and I'll select this face right here. Now I'm trying to see, it looks like there's actually a part of a fillet in here as well, and so I'm going to see if I can select, well, there isn't a planar face on the other side, so I'll select that face, and then I'm going to also select, I'm trying to decide how I want to do this. Let's just go ahead and say okay, and see what that looks like. All right, so I'm trying to see if that is going to give me what I want. Let's do slice this way, and I see that I actually want to get over to here. And so let's do P again. Let's see if I can project this edge right here. Okay, I'll say okay to that. And now I've got that edge over to there. Let me turn off the body so you can see that. So now I have this edge over to here. I'm going to just change this to construction or delete it. And I'll put another rectangle because there's an opening down here and an opening up here. I might just delete these 2 lines as well. And then I'm going to put a rectangle across here. So I'll put it from here to here. Now notice I don't need any dimensions if I do it this way, because it will always adapt to the size of the body, and then I can, if I change my dimensions, then that is going to update automatically. All right, let's go back at finish sketch, and let's make that sketch visible. And I'll do an extrude. Now my sketch is down inside there, and so I might have trouble getting it. If I went into section view, I could get it here right away, but let's leave it out like this. Let's say we have a sketch, a profile that's down inside the body, and we want to get it. I'm going to long left click, and when I long left click, I get choices. I can select that face, I can select the inside face, I can select a profile, that's what I want, or I could select the next set of faces that are underneath the cursor. So I want that profile, so that's the long left click trick. And then I'm going to come out this way, and I'll tell it to go through all for the distance. Okay, so it's going to cut coming out here. All right, I'll hide that sketch, and then we'll put some finishing touches on this.